Good evening, everyone. My name is Jose Rincon. I'm the Artistic Services Manager here at Opera America. It's my pleasure to welcome you here tonight for our Making Connections session on acting resources for singers. On your seats, you have a program with bios for tonight's panelists, and you also have the Opera America season brochure for our programs for artists, with information on this program and on our Salon series, and lots of other great web resources. Before we get started tonight, if you could take a moment to silence your cell phones, anything that might make noise during the discussion. The discussion will go until about 8 p.m. tonight. Afterwards, we hope you'll stay for a glass of wine and some continued conversation. Without further delay, then, I will turn it over to John.
Thank you, Jose. So we have a lot of ground to cover, so I'd just like to jump in right over talk and ask you the first question. And the question is there even such a thing as acting for singers? Or is it acting just acting? And if it's different, then what is the difference between acting for singers and acting for other actors?
I'll say hello. I'm Chuck Hudson. It's nice to meet you. I'm a stage director and an acting instructor. And my background comes from having been trained as an actor, having been an actor, done directing in the theater as well as directing in opera. So I'm very attracted to this idea of acting in opera. I always say that we go for theatrical truth, and depending on the style of show that you're in, that truth comes out in a very, very different way. Lots of people say, does it feel real, or is it real? And realism is one of many styles of acting that you can do. Reality testing versus truth doesn't always work. If you are playing Desdemona, you're going to be strangled, and then you're going to sing. Or you're going to be strangled, and then you're going to have a speech. And there's nothing real about that. Medically, that's impossible. The theatrical truth of that, however, is very compelling. So singers in particular have to deal with sometimes the lack of reality or the suspension of reality in a different way than speaking actors do. With classical theater, with opera in general, things need to be bigger without losing their theatrical truth. A lot of times you wind up being in the rehearsal studio and you find these amazing moments of intimacy and depth of character that you lose when you get out into a larger stage. And finding ways of keeping that intimacy and that truth in a larger, more projectable form is something that's very particular, especially to opera singers. Something that I find fascinating is that speaking actors have a lot of techniques that they can use to play subtext. We get to vary tempo, rhythm, we can add pauses, we can play with crescendos, we can play with decrescendos, we can do lots of things musically with our text that singers are not allowed to play with because that's dictated to them by the composer. So something that I find fascinating about acting with singers is that we must rely more on movement training and physical behavior on stage to portray what's going on below the text or beyond the text.
Amy, it's sort of a related question, and many of you know that Amy is very closely affiliated to the New York Festival of Song. Do you adjust the way that you act when you're doing a song recital versus when you're on stage? And if so, how do you do that? How do you make this different?
Well, so much of what you do on stage in an opera is decided either with the director or by the director, and you have costumes, you have a stage reality that you're part of, so there are many ways to show things. You might not have to do anything with your face or your voice. You might be doing a particular action that would tell, like subtext, that would tell a lot about what's going on. So you have none of that in a recital. If you're talking about just the size of things, I would say, I would speak to what Chuck just said, that things work in a small rehearsal room that might not work on a big operatic stage. So the recital hall, again, if you're playing Carnegie Hall, if you're playing a very intimate space like this, you can automatically kind of scale it so that you can feel like you're connecting with the people. But you really do have to create your own world. And I find with song, there are many different types of songs. If it's the type of song where you're a narrator that's sort of impartial and then maybe becoming certain characters. The best example is the Earl King. You're the narrator, and then you're all these different characters, but it doesn't always have to be that extreme. Sometimes, are you telling something that happened to you? Is the song happening right now? Is it a recollection? So there are all sorts of acting choices to be made that don't have to be anything really obvious and visible. I think acting out in terms of, like semaphore acting, where you're pretending you're reading a book or doing this, I think that is where I would definitely draw the line.
Yeah.
Unless it's a very broad kind of comic effect you're going for. So you have to kind of create a world that is indicated maybe more than obviously displayed.
Yeah. Now, Mark, I've seen a couple versions of the operas that you do concert versions, and I know you have a lot of experience doing that. Do you, as a director, guide singers any differently than you would if they were doing a full-fledged performance or a fully staged performance, or is it the same?
I would say probably that the difference, if there is one, is that I'm probably tougher to get to that reality in a concert format because there's nothing to obstruct the performance. There's no makeup, there's no wig, there's no scenery, there's no costume. It's just, sometimes dressed all in black, and you have your voice and your face and the music, and that's it. So I would say if the difference lies, it lies within having to be truthful just in and of yourself to carry that character through and carry their story through without anything extra. You have to create an entire world just through your acting and your voice, and that's it. Nothing to hide behind. So I would say the difference is that as a director is I probably push harder.
Okay. Chuck, do you have anything to add? I've done concert versions.
I've done more semi-staged versions, I have to say, and I just think that semi-staged is the amount of staging that you can do with the space you're given and the time you're given. As Mark was saying, we need to tell the story, and that is one of the most important things, whether we get to tell the story standing still, or tell the story with a variety of levels, or tell the story with complete sets and costumes. Even in a concert version, I think we're still trying to convey not just information and sound, but to tell the story and to touch the people with the conflicts and with the relationships that are going on stage.
Tangled with the Summer, there was a production of Porgy and Bess that was a concert / semi-stage version, and the principals obviously had a clear sense of where they wanted to go, but the ensemble and the sort of the smaller ensembles, some were throwing themselves into it 100%. Some were a little bit removed, almost like a Greek chorus. And so I was wondering if maybe, Mark, you could start off, talking a little bit about what you want the ensemble to do in some of those kinds of situations, because I think for young singers, a lot of times you're going to be put into maybe the chorus in a stage, especially with young artist programs and training programs, and you have to decide how much you're going to throw yourself in and try not to stick out.
Right. You're talking about a concert.
Yeah, like a concert version, you're part of the ensemble. How far do you go with your acting, and how much do you sort of play in the background?
Well, a lot of that is going to be dictated by the space itself, and I've done versions where the chorus was just in the background, and I've done versions where the chorus actually came down front and participated in the action. Either way, I think the chorus should participate 100%, whether they're physically active or not. Because I think part of the job of the chorus is to tell their story and support the story of the leading characters. So I think just to have a vocal sound, depending of course on the piece, on the scene, et cetera, is going to dictate how far you can go. But I think just to have a sound that's supporting a piece like that wouldn't be enough.
Amy, can you talk about a time that you were preparing a role that was particularly dramatically quite complex and difficult, and where did you go for assistance, and what kind of tools did you use? Like maybe after school when you were just starting a professional career.
Well, just after school. Well, I started working pretty much after school. I was supposed to go off and do my master's, and I wound up getting some singing engagements and never stopped. So never really got back to school. So a lot of what I learned on my feet. And I did do 2 young artist programs, and that gave me some acting rudiments and things that really helped me kind of find my way. But I think the specific role actually came later in my career, the one that I would like to talk about. But I guess the thing about having the tools to go in different directions is the most important thing in your training, because you can't talk about acting without talking about directors. And you have directors that will want to, change your pinky from there to there, and if you don't do it, you'll get notes about it and get extra rehearsals for it. You have directors that really want your input and want to discuss, directors that, just give you nothing at all, and you're on your own, and then you really need those tools more than ever. That's probably, I think, most singers' least favorite situation, where they just feel like they're, floating, and everyone may come up with their own concept and there isn't a unified whole, but you have to be able to do it with nothing. A lot of semi-stage situations, you're very often thrown into something, so you have to have that to create something. But for me, research is really important. The role that I was thinking of was La Voix Humaine. And if you don't know La Voix Humaine, it's a one-act opera with one person in it. And so it's 45 minutes of just you in French. It's based on the Cocteau play. And I was very excited and terrified. So I did a lot of research. Obviously, I translated the play. That's the first thing. Did a lot of research about Cocteau, read letters of him and Poulenc, dug into the music, really looked at everything, tried to make the connection from one section to the other, did all my work, and arrived with a year of preparation to the first rehearsal. And I had also had contact with the director. So we had batted around a lot of ideas. And so I felt really ready to just almost do a concert performance. The director that I had, we had really hammered out a lot of these ideas ahead of time. What he actually wanted me to do physically had nothing to do with, on the surface, with what the character, what we had agreed and sort of hammered out together. And that was very instructive to me, because actually what you can be doing physically can seem to have nothing to do with what you're saying, but it can be incredibly powerful. I had never worked in that way before, and this is with a year of discussion with the director. So that was really interesting to find that out, that a lot of times all the work you do goes underground, and it takes a different form. But the main thing, I think, is just to be ready to, just like you work with different conductors, to be ready to go into a very highly stylized production, or to be totally on your own and be able to create something, or some combination.
Now, Chuck, I know you are about to go to San Francisco to work with the Adler Fellows at San Francisco Opera. And after you're done with them, with your time there, and they want some more, they want some more help. They're out, many of them are out of school. What will you tell them to do? Where should they go when they don't have the guidance of school anymore, or a young artist program?
I first of all tell them to feel free to use me as a resource, to feel free to email me. I may not be able to answer them immediately, but I mean, we're such an electronic group of people these days that it's very, very easy to keep in touch and to answer questions. And if I don't know the answer to the question, I can say, I know this friend of mine who does this particular thing, maybe you can talk to them. And we're a referral business as well as artists, so being able to refer from one person to another, I think, is really important. Continued study, and it's, especially when you're in a young artist program, and something that is as intensive as the Adler program, where it is over a 2-year period, and you're doing productions on stage with the directors, and you're also involved in your own work as a young artist. Organizing your day is very, very challenging, and you have to have a life to be able to portray a life on stage. So you have to have a life as well as doing all of this work. I always say that organization is the key to entertainment. So if you know that in June you're going to be playing this particular role and it's January now, you start your research now. As Amy was just saying, a year in advance, that gives you time to leave it alone and to come back to it and to search out those resources. Many young artists, I always ask them, what are you doing this summer? If you're not in a young artist program, what are you going to do? And many of them are going to have their lives, which is fantastic. Very few of them say, I'm going to go sign up for a summer-long acting intensive with the such and such company in New York City, or in upstate New York, or in San Francisco. Or I'm going to go work with the Baroque Dance Company of New York because I'm going to be doing Don Giovanni in the fall, and I have to do all 3 of those dances that happen in that show to get themselves prepared. There are so many resources out there for you to actually do things. Mm-hmm. Companies that do weekend master classes, that do week-long master classes, that do summer-long master classes, that do professional development. You have your day job, but you can work twice a week with this acting class. It's a scene study program. There's plenty of opportunities out there, and believe it or not, Backstage Magazine is a great place to find them. Just like you find auditions, you'll find all of these different master classes and all of these different professionals that you can contact.
Sure. So, Mark, congratulations. You were just named the director of the Young Arts Program for Central City Opera. And so I just want to see if we can put it in an example. Say I'm a young artist, and I've got my first chance at playing Mazzetto. I've always wanted to be a baritone, never quite happened. What do I do before I come to you, before I get to Central City? What's the work that I've done? Obviously, I've read, historical information, but I've never been a country bumpkin. I've never had a fiance who almost, or maybe did cheat on me. Like, what do I do to prepare before I get to the rehearsal space?
Know the music. Look at all of the possibilities. Explore the possibilities in your head of where the character could go. Operative word being could, because, as you said, you can do all of the research. You can do a year-long research, and then suddenly you get with the director, and he couldn't care less. So I think it's really about being an open book, and being able to easily take the character in this direction, this direction, this direction, this direction. So because I do work with young singers a lot, I tend to direct people doing their roles for the first time, which has its challenges. On the other hand, you never get the I've done it that way, or I've never done it that way. So I think whether you're a young artist or a more experienced artist, I think the best thing is to be open to any possibility of where a character could go. I've done, like I said, the first performance that someone has created in a role. I've also done the 10th. And there's nothing more exciting than doing a role with someone who's done it many times and then having them say to you, I never thought of it that way. As a director, that's one of the greatest things you could hear. One of the worst things you can hear is, that. We're going to do that again. Or, you're going to go there. You're going to go there with this. Something like that. But I would say just be prepared and be open. And when preparation and possibility come together, I think that's when the greatest things happen.
So Amy, in sort of switching to the idea of the macro sense of how acting has changed over a period of time, do you think that the emergence of the Met's HD transmissions or social media has been a good thing for today's sort of singing actors? Or do you think it's made us focus a little bit too much on the visual components and some sort of superficial qualities and taken focus away from learning how to have the technical skill to convey meaning with just music?
Well, I don't know that they're connected exactly. I do think that the HD it's a very new thing, and I don't think we've really seen a whole generation felt to really. We'd have to see that to really see what the impact is. But I think people have already felt in the opera house that they're not getting the same kind of performances, because if you play to the back of the Met, it's going to be too big for the movies. And so you have a lot of movie acting going on now, which is, you raise an eyebrow and that's 5 feet high. It's a whole different kind of acting. So I think that's going to be a big topic of discussion, actually, because it's very hard to, just as you would scale it down for a room this size, to do a recital in a room this size from a big theater. I don't know what that feels like. I haven't done any of those myself. I don't know what it's like to act for the camera when you're in a 4,000-seat house.
Sure.
So I do think that the separate issue is one more of physical appearance, and I really have very mixed feelings about that, because I do think it's great if you can have a Tosca who looks like a gorgeous, glamorous, opera star, or who's obviously a very desired, beautiful woman. But whereas I think sometimes it might be if someone really doesn't look like the part they're supposed to be playing, I suppose that could be a negative. But I feel that opera is primarily an art form that comes through the voice. So that if you don't have that element there, I really don't think you have opera. But I may be in a shrinking minority. So I don't know. But I do think that there's a lot of focus on it right now, and I hope it doesn't lose the heart of opera, which is the voice and the whole thing, all these art forms together, coming together to make something very unique and big.
If I can just chime in on what she was just talking about, I agree. I don't know where this experiment of HD is going, because I don't know what it is. Are we looking at a movie version of the opera, in which case we should be shooting close-ups and then they should be singing in a studio somewhere and then we dub, which is how you make a movie? Or are we watching a filmed version of the opera at the Met, in which case they shouldn't be playing for the cameras. We should be getting the feeling that we are a member of that audience and seeing that. So I still think that even the people that are making it don't really know yet what it is that we're making.
Right.
I don't think through the camera. I think three-dimensionally in the space, and there are ways to give the impression of a close-up when you are 40 feet away from somebody that will not work when there's actually a close-up that is going on. And often if the cameraman has not been involved in the rehearsal process, they're doing this wonderful close-up, but they're missing the other thing that person is doing that makes the story actually make sense to them, because they're only thinking about their face.
Right. Mark, I have a quote I want to read to you and get your reaction to it. It's from this month's issue of Opera News, and the person speaking is Joyce DiDonato, who was actually a former panelist for us a couple years ago. And she's normally got a very happy, sunny, Midwestern disposition, but yes. This is not her. This is not that in the quote, so I'm going to read it to you. It's about acting and opera.
Okay.
So the other thing that's driving me crazy is the notion that somehow in the last 5 years the opera community has finally discovered how to act. The style has changed. I'll be the first to say that. If you go back and see an old Hitchcock movie, they were ridiculous in the way that it's stylized, but it's of that time. So don't tell me these people weren't acting. They were doing a lot with the voice. So I think it's really arrogant of me to start thinking we've reinvented the wheel. Our style is changing and it's exciting. I like the fact that I'm expected to go out there and be believable, but I don't want to denigrate the generations that came before me. So I'm just curious to know what your reaction is, and do you think the style has changed over the last decade or 2 decades, and how have they changed?
Well, my first reaction is, I've been compared to Hitchcock in a review, so I don't know what that says about me. I don't know where this comes from, that suddenly opera singers are acting. I think she's right. I think the obvious choices to talk about singing actors would be Callas and Stratas and Malfitano, but nobody ever talks about George London. Nobody ever talks about Cheryl Mills. Or Fiorenza Casotto, or Scotto, or it's. I think she's absolutely right. I honestly don't know where this comes from. I think, yes, it's a stylistic thing. And I think the fact that she does touch on film of that time is a very wise comparison. And I think it's also going to depend on the style of directing. There are a lot more theater directors directing. I still don't even really know what that means. But I think what we're going for today isn't really different from what a director would have been going for 20 or 30 or 40 years ago. I think it's the approach. I think it's the terminology. I think there is a physical component that we do live in. Something that you were talking about was, what everyone looks like. We do live in a very cosmetic society, and that is going to be reflected when you go into the theater, whether it's a Broadway house or an opera house or whatever. But I agree with what she's saying in that I think it would be a crime to discount all of the opera singers that came before and to say that, acting in opera started in 1995 or something. I don't understand that.
Amy, did you find that you had to adjust your acting technique at all throughout the course of your career, or has it always just been sort of organic? I know you said you started working pretty much right out of school. So.
I did. I think I was very lucky. I was in a young artist program for 2 years, and then they brought me back as an artist the third year, and I got to work with Leon Major, who was my acting teacher, and then he was my director for my first Susanna in Figaro. So I really got to, come back and then see through an entire production of a fantastic, huge, long, complicated role with my acting teacher. And I felt like I learned how to think. And that was the most important thing. Well, two things. I learned how to think, and I learned how to think as a character might think. Where could this character go? Where, what does this character want? Why can this character maybe do this or this but not that? Why would this be a really bad choice for this character? I learned how to think, and I did a lot of mask work, which is where you have a mask that it's got nostrils and eye holes, but no mouth, so you don't have your voice. Essentially, you don't have your face except for your eyes. All you have is your body. And I remember that moment of total paralysis of just, how do I communicate what I want to communicate without my voice and my soubrette smile, my face? Like, how do I do that? And then suddenly I felt like I sprouted wings, and I felt like my body learned how to communicate. So learning how to think and learning how to move, how my body is an expressive instrument by what attitudes it takes. It's hard to explain, but just you can communicate so much just by your body language, but really specifically learning how to use that while not upstaging yourself or someone else. All the practical considerations, seeing the conductor without, making it obvious that you're doing that. So that was really important, and I felt like from there I could go and work with anybody. And I'd say until I started to work later on with some directors who were extremely stylized, and I think this is a reality. This is, there are the directors that will, really want to discuss everything and be very sort of, try this, try that, and then edit it down or improvise something, to directors who will be very stylized and meticulous. And for me, learning how to do that as well, how to keep the thought, keep the thinking, keep the discretion open, but also be able to show that in many different ways, a naturalistic style or an extremely stylized style, or even a symbolic style where you don't feel it particularly, but hopefully the director is good, and it's part of the design concept, which is more and more what's happening. So you may be part of some bigger whole, and you have to understand where you fit in there. And how you can't always get a direct expression of what you think this character is doing in this particular moment. It may have to be part of something. You may be part of something bigger, but you have to have a certain amount. It's a little bit like, you can be an abstract expressionist, but you better know how to draw a straight line freehand.
Chuck, one of the books that you recommend for singers is called Acting for Singers by David Ostwald, and he in the book he addresses the "I can't act now, I have to hit a high note" moment that a lot of singers have, especially a lot of young singers. And I was just wondering, how do you overcome that with a singer who's still navigating their technique? And are there any exercises you could give us examples of, not actually with any of your audience members, but just like that you would work on with a young artist or a young singer?
What is tricky, I think, is that for young artists that are learning to sing, Amy was just touching on that there are layers of this, that it was after she had graduated and had come back working with this director that she said, I now know how to think, right? That if you're thinking about the position that your soft palate is in, you're probably not going to be able to convey the information that you're trying to convey to me, let alone play an action. So you've got to get to a point where that is automatic, where that is happening automatically. We don't want to hear or see your technique. We want you to use your technique to be able to sing. If you're a swimmer, you say, jump into the pool and swim, and the swimmer doesn't stand there and calculate their weight-to-water dispersal ratio before they jump into the water. They know how to float and how to swim. So I think when a young artist is ready to add that layer on, that's something that they must confront, which is why sometimes in undergrad programs you don't get a lot of acting. It is in graduate programs, it is in young artist programs where that layer is put on because they are at a level technically with their voice that they are ready to think about other things. The other thing is that performers in general are like Neanderthals. And this is going to be Hitchcockian of actors are cattle. No, they're not. But we multitask. Neanderthals couldn't multitask. They could make a tool, they could look out for danger, but they couldn't make a tool while looking out for danger. And that's what we have to be as actors. We multitask all the time. I am walking down the street, I am attacked, and I react in my fear and courageously step forward to confront that person. On stage, we need to see a logical sequence of actions that the audience can follow. I need to recoil in fear, realize that that person is not a threat, decide to step up to the plate, and then confront them. And as an actor, you need to know that you're doing that so that you can do it consistently every night. Composers like Mozart give you plenty of time to do things like that because you'd be amazed at how much time there is in the music to actually break things down into logical beats of action. Using that vocabulary, Mark was saying it's a different vocabulary that we're using with acting now. So many singers hear the word intention, action, beat of action. Then when I, as a director, ask them, what are you doing on this beat? Where does it begin? Where does it end? They're like, I really don't know that. It's a lot of verbiage, but there's not a lot of actual doing of it. I have certainly found that when I work with singers, if I only speak in active verbs, they start thinking in active verbs. With actors, I can speak in results, and I can say, you're angry, walk into the room, you're in love. You can't actually play those things. Actors know how to take that and turn it into action. With singers, I have to say, burst into the room, plant your ground, nail the soprano to the wall with your voice. And they don't say, how do I do that? They say, get out of my way, I know how to do that. Because they're now thinking in pictures and thinking in actions. So how I communicate with singers when I'm giving them direction, especially with a shortened amount of rehearsal time, I need to get results out of them quickly, but I also need to get them to trust me to take the direction that I'm going to give them later on that will be more subtle.
Can I jump in here for a second? Chuck, something you said about the nailing the soprano to the wall with his voice, that's actually something that I am just starting to put into words with my own students, that kind of thing, where the acting is not, it's not something put on top of their singing, but something integrated.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess the singers have to be secure enough technically to be able to do
Yes.
that. But I really think, and even with my very young students, I try to at least plant the seed that that's going to happen. Like, I know right now you're thinking about your soft palate a lot, or you're thinking about, keeping your ribs, from rib cage from collapsing, or whatever it is, or keeping the focus of the spin. But these are the tools that you are going to have, the different colors and shadings of voice, that are going to be integrated into your ultimate interpretation.
Mm-hmm.
I said to someone who was working on Manon a couple of days ago, I was trying to get her to get this very silky, sort of sinuous, sensual, kind of flirtatious, coquettish thing in her voice, because that's what the character is at that particular moment. And I said, using this kind of voice at this particular moment is like showing some leg, and she kind of, it took her back for a minute, and I said it's not just that you're physically being flirtatious, but you have to be vocally flirtatious
Mm-hmm.
here. And so I think that that's something that they also have to be in command of these different colors that you can use.
And staying in the moment. This is something that directors say all the time. If you don't know where a moment begins and where it ends and what the next moment is, you can't be in the moment. In an audition situation, if you're coming in and you're worried about the cue flat that's going to happen 6 minutes from now, you're not going to hit me in the first 15 seconds of the audition, which is when I've decided whether I'm calling you back or not. So we need to set up each moment, and you earn the cue flat, and suddenly they go, oh, my soft palate went there all by itself because I'm trained to do that, and it happens. Now, yes, there are situations where I was working on the Rake's Progress, and you've got something like Stravinsky, where the poor things are changing time signatures every 5 breaths, where I was working with an actor who is a singer, actor, whatever you performer, whatever word we're going to use. They're coming down a set of stairs. They need to turn and lift something while singing this particular moment. We did it a couple times, and finally this tenor just looked at me and said, can I just stand still and count to 7 right here, and then I'll do whatever you need after that. And again, because the Neanderthal that he was needed to, right now, count to 7. So we've got to figure out how do they earn stillness. What is that character doing right now where stillness is going to help them get what they want, and it's also going to allow the singer to dramatically hide the technical need to stand still and count to 7. And I'm totally open to finding that, because it's them up there, not me.
Right.
I want to make it, it's part of their job to make this appear effortless. They need to have anything that they have up there to help them be effortless.
Maybe the quote of the night: 2 tenors are Neanderthals. Mark, so what's the best way for a singer to communicate with you? Or how would you like a singer to say to you, I can't do that? Let's say you've got a Queen of the Night and you want her to slide down a banister and run around the 3 ladies while doing the rondo of the first aria. And she can't. What's the best way to approach you? During it, in front of everyone, after? How would you want someone to say it to you, other than just, I can't, I won't? I'm thinking about the high F.
Well, luckily that's never happened, but
You get another Queen of the Night,
right.
Well, I don't know that you
Fired.
would ask her to do that. I think
Yeah,
either.
exactly.
You're probably more sensitive to her
Yeah.
needs.
I would hope so. But I would probably skip over it for the moment. Because I think one of the worst things to do is to fall into a discussion with one singer when there's an audience of other singers around. I would probably skip over it and say that we would talk about it later. We would move on to the next thing, or I would ask her to try different things. But I do come from a choreographic background, So my shows tend to be active. But I've also been on stage a lot, so I get that there are moments when you can be very active and there are moments when you can't.
Yeah.
So it's, I find it's the director who's never been up there who is the most, or the least understanding.
Yeah.
But I'm actually also finding more and more that singers are hungry for this kind of information that we're talking about. They want that kind of, feed me. I want to know what the character's thinking. I want to know what we're doing. I want to be believable. I want it to be real. I actually personally don't find it that difficult. And over the last 20 years, I've found it less and less difficult. I don't find it really difficult at all, because it's part of a singer's training now. It's part of the nature. It's part of the desire as an all-around performer to want to be the character in every aspect, not just the voice and the body, but in every molecule.
Amy said something delightful a second ago. She said, while I was in preparation, I communicated with the director. And young artists don't think of doing that because, for the most part, young artists, their directors are their teachers and they're getting a grade. So they think that there's a right and a wrong way of doing things and that director has the answer, and they don't really communicate. In the theater world, we come from a place of communication right off the bat because I'm auditioning these people. I get to see if they can take my direction. I get to play with that chemistry. In the opera world, I'm normally meeting the people, if I've never worked with them before, for the first time on that first day of rehearsal. And I have to figure out how to make them work together and what their strengths are. Before rehearsals begin, normally 6 weeks, even more than that, I email all of them. I say, hello, my name is Chuck Hudson, I'm your director. And this is the ideas that I'm thinking about, and this is the first time I've done this show, and you've done it 17 times. What things do you want to share with me? What difficulties have you had that you'd like me to be thinking about to help you? Most singers don't even respond, oddly enough, because they're like, the hell is he contacting me for? Because it's just so alien to them. Some singers write back and go, thank you so much for asking me. I'll go wherever you want. Don't even worry about it. Others are like, thank you. I need to know this and this and this and this, and I'd love your input. I've had some people that have said, I don't want to do this, I don't want to do this, I don't want to do that. And of course, the 3 of those things are things that I'm going to ask them to do, so I'm at least prepared.
Yeah.
In that moment where it can become confrontational, I would probably not pursue it either. Some advice that I would have for singers then is show me, don't tell me. If they can then say, may I show you another option? Ideally, I'd love to singer slide down that thing first and go, see, it's difficult for me. May I show you something else? And that they've tried something and that they propose something to me, and I go, either thank you for that, not the direction that I'd like to go in, but I at least now know that they're creative and collaborative. Or I'll go, oh my God, that's incredible. I didn't know you could do that. Let's go in a completely different direction. It is a collaboration. It is a communication. And the more you can comfortably communicate. We were just talking about this at dinner. I was trained and I was directed in the school of humiliation. I was humiliated in front of people often. So that's the last thing I want to do to anybody who's performing. And that can happen in that public situation where that singer might in fact be able to slide down that banister 2 days from now, but they think that they have to do it perfectly right now because all these people are watching. So yeah, the fact that it is a public situation, it becomes very, very sensitive.
We have about 15 minutes. I was wondering if anyone in the audience had any questions. Or first, I want to take a pulse in the room. How many are singers in the room? Okay. Do we have any directors? Great. So, from the singers first, do we have any questions from any of the singers?
Yeah. Actually, I had a question for you because you were mentioning how some can be, quote, difficult. I was curious because you said you were working with mostly young artists. So I didn't know if young artists actually had sort of were able to be difficult at that point, considering they're just young artists. I mean, I was just wondering if you actually meant that there were young artists who were saying, immediately, no, I will not do this, no, I will not do this, no, I will not.
I have experienced that, yes.
That's interesting.
Yes,
I wonder how,
18-year-olds tell me that no, this is the way it's going to be, and that I have no idea what I'm talking
as a
about.
director, can you? I mean, you'll take that from them, and then you'll just. I mean, I'm curious.
It depends
how
on
they
the
can get that.
situation that you're in. I was directing a production in a university, and I was working with one singer, and there were probably 200 people in the room, faculty, the full chorus was there, the dancers were there. It was a very, very public thing. And the singer was not going there. And so I tried this tactic, they weren't going there. I tried that tactic, they're not going there. I tried this tactic. I kind of exhausted everything, and then my final tactic is bark. I do not yell, I bark. So I said, try it again. I pitched down, do it again, shh, do it one more time. And suddenly everybody in the room got super tense, and that singer did it like you would not believe. So then I said, okay, we're in an educational situation. How many in the room are now petrified to work with me? Everybody raises their hand. They go, how many of you now think that I'm a jerk and you do not trust me? They all raise their hands. I said, now here's the thing. That singer just taught me to treat them that way. I tried 4 or 5 different things. She did not react. I barked. I got incredible work out of her. I now know how in a very short amount of time to get that work out of her. So if directors are barking at you all the time, you may be participating in that need to be barked at as well.
I think one of the most difficult things in opera, but as an opera director, is that we don't cast. I think it's changing a little bit. But whether you communicate with people prior to the rehearsal process or not, is to walk into that room the first day and try to figure out how this person works, and figure out how to approach the Scarpia's way of working, the Tosca's way of working, and the Cavaradossi's way of working, and analyze it in maybe a day, and then go at each singer in that way. There's a lot of very quick thinking that has to happen, because you can't walk into every rehearsal the same way, because you're dealing with a whole different...
And observation skills, again, coming from a place of respect. This singer needs me to give them their notes verbally. This singer needs to get them written. This singer, I need to actually stand next to them and walk them through the space. And you do learn that it's normally about in the first 3 days of rehearsal that we've pretty much seen everybody by then,
right.
And you have figured that out. And that's part of your job as a director, to figure that out. Here's a singer that I know came from this young artist program where they do value acting and movement because my friend taught them. Here's a singer from Czechoslovakia who's been taught to come downstage center, park, and bark. They're doing a duet together. So I again have to find the strengths in both of those people and figure out how to make my vision come across. I may not be able to get that singer to do what that singer is doing, but that singer is still going to rock because they've got something of their own that they can offer. It's what shuts down is when ego and fear steps in, and the I won't do that or I can't do that comes in, which of course is also harder to say because there are now 20 people out there who look just like you, who sing a little bit better, who are willing. So it is a slightly more competitive field now, like acting is.
I think respect is the key word, because I came into the opera world with asking a lot of questions and being very intellectually curious and eager to talk about things all the time. Some directors really loved that, and I think it drove some other directors up the wall. And if I could change anything, I would be a little bit more like what Mark was saying. They're feeling you out, you have to fill them out too. And if there's something you don't want to waste other people's time in rehearsal, you don't want to grind the schedule to a halt because you've got 20 questions about something. So you have to kind of respect the process too and respect your part of it and not challenge so much. But if there is something that is really on your mind, you can always say, can we get together after, can I...
Let's have coffee,
let's
have lunch,
coffee,
let's talk about that.
And talk about it where you're not sort of, really putting a jam in the process or confronting somebody or making some kind of a scene. That's never a good thing.
I think we have time for maybe one more question. Any questions from the directors in the room at all? Any?
I'm not a director, but I have a question. It's, I guess in terms of when you talk to young singers about the timeline of all of this, you talked about how ideally the technique will be solid before you start to integrate some of the into the acting and the dramatic aspects. But I know a lot of young singers think that they need to learn it all, you know, in their first 2 years of undergrad if they're going to stand a chance to have any kind of career. So what advice do you give them about, you know, giving them perspective on how long it takes to actually develop these skills?
You're talking to me?
You or anybody that, you know.
Well, I think it's funny because I do think that there's a lot of pressure now that you're right about that first 2 years. There's a lot of pressure to you know, get out and start doing things. I actually think that at a certain point, and you know, as a teacher, I try to gauge where that is, but I'm not always in charge of the way things happen. There's a critical point when they need to start putting things on stage in order for the singing to progress. Because, and I try to do this even in lessons, you know, because if there's, you know, they stand there and you can just see there's nothing going on here except I have to get all these things right. I have to get the languages right, and I have to get the sound right, and I have to get the breathing right, and all that. And I just want to say, okay, well, you did all this work, but, you know, you are singing a love song. Or you know, you really are pretty angry in this, or you're really upset. So, you know, I tried to, because I think I was always, I think, more of an actor, and I had to work more on the singing. So for me, you know, that for me and for a lot of my students, I think that is like putting the plug in the wall, and then suddenly all the parts work. You have to do all that work separately, but then it has to all feed in. So I don't know. I mean, I think some of those connections, some of that ability to sing and move and think and act and communicate and interact, you have to just get up and do it at some point. And actually, that's what compromario parts are so great for. You know, being the page who comes on and sings 3 lines and stands and sings with the chorus and gets to watch the principals and gets to learn Gilda by watching somebody do it, or whatever. Doing Adele's sister in Die Fledermaus and getting to watch Adele and Rosalinda and all that. You know, I think that's a great... that's what the young artist programs used to be, I think, much more than they are now. Now, a lot of times kids get pushed into doing big roles because it's economical for the company. But it used to be that, you know, you started with those little roles and worked your way up, and by that time you knew the opera really well, and you had gotten a chance to watch more experienced people at their craft through the whole process, from the first rehearsal to the last performance.
You know, it's interesting that you say that, because I just did a university production of The Magic Flute, and they'd hired a professional singer to sing the role of Zarastro, and they had a student covering him. And it turned out that the student did most of the rehearsals. And when we had the first couple of rehearsals and I heard the kid sing, I thought, well, it makes perfect sense that he's the cover and that they didn't give him the part. However, 6 weeks later, when we got to the point where the professional had come back, the kid was better than the professional, because his voice, it changed his voice doing the rehearsals.
Sure. Yeah.
It was incredible. The kid had a different voice because he got to be there and do the part, and all of the top opened up where he didn't have any top at all. He didn't even have a middle. And suddenly he had this voice because he was putting it was all coming together.
You get better by doing.
Yeah.
The timeline thing is always strange, I think, and the heady academic in me will say that it takes a year of constantly doing one technique for it to become part of your technique. That after a while you're like, oh, I've been doing that for the past year, and it's just something I do naturally now. They say that it takes 10 years of doing something for you to master a technique or to master something. If you were to look at it, kind of what you're talking about is almost the slight physiological changes that happen to that person over time through repetition. And if you think of a pianist who is playing the piano like this, and after 10 years they're playing it differently, if you look at their hands are built differently at that point. And the amount of time that it takes an art form to actually transform your physicality is a long time, and that's something that needs to happen to all of us as artists. Even though I'm not up on stage anymore, there's something in me that is changing because of the life that I'm leading. A show that I read 10 years ago said nothing to me. A show that I'm reading now, I can't wait to direct because I'm 10 years further along in my life as well. I also hope to be one of those people that wakes up on my deathbed going, I just learned something new, and I hope that we never stop learning something to always be becoming better. There are students, though, that think that they've got to know it all perfectly before they actually get out there and do the rehearsal process. It's a very compartmentalized thing. There's languages, and there's acting, and there's movement, and there's yoga, and then there's... and it's only in performance that you actually get to integrate those things.
I also wish young singers would go to other art forms more. Go to a museum, go to a play, go to a dance concert, expose yourselves to other art forms. I can't tell you how many young opera students have never even seen a play.
Yeah.
All right, well, thank you very much to all of our panelists.
Thank you.
For a little while longer if you want to ask any individual questions. And thanks so much, Jose and Opera America.
What are you doing?
It's a small staff because it's technically now Miller Theater is under the auspices of the School of the Arts in Columbia. They've been last year. So the director of the Miller Theater, Melissa George, now reports to the dean of the school, and we're just sort of getting it focused. Gotcha. It's a little different now, but curatorially, it's still on her. Cool. Oh, really?